I lead a ministry called Kids for Christ, which is meeting in the public schools and elementary schools. And I'd been praying for God to give us a man who would be willing to come in and lead our sixth graders. We usually break them out separately and do something different with them. And we had a big group of boys, and I knew that a man would connect much more to those boys. And so one day I was worshiping on the weekend, and I looked over and I saw Nate worshiping, and the Holy Spirit just was like, that's him. That's who you need to ask. And so I hit Nate up a couple weeks later and said, hey, I lead this ministry. I don't know if you'd be interested or not. And he said, let me pray about it and get back to you.
I think I knew that we'd stumbled onto something pretty great when at camp he walked in as I was kind of sharing something that I needed kind of last minute. It's one of those brilliant ideas that I have last second for a game. And I turned to him and say, I need a water balloon launcher, some sponges, and some thick soap so we can hit kids in the face with it. And he didn't hesitate. He just scurried off to see what he could find. And he came running back to me with a water balloon launcher, a bucket, and some Dove dish soap. And he just had that willingness.
I was thrilled that he did get back to me. He didn't just ignore it, and he said yes. And so he came on as our sixth grade leader for Kids for Christ. And I tell you what, I didn't know Nate that well at that point. I was excited he was willing, and I knew he loved the Lord, and that was kind of the qualifications for me. But I didn't know exactly how God was going to use that, and it was really cool to see that unfold. We meet for Kids for Christ at 7:30 in the morning on Fridays, so it's not exactly your ideal time that most teenagers raise their hand and are like, yeah, sign me up. I want to get up that early. But Nate was there every week. I remember the first time we met, I texted him the night before on Thursday and was like, hey, Nate, do you remember we're doing this tomorrow? Don't forget. And he's like, I'm on it. I'll be there. And he was. He was there early. He helped set up the room. He was prepared. We had given him some sort of lesson plans, but he had reworked them based on what he thought would be best reaching out to those kids. And it was just incredible to see somebody who at the time was 19 have that kind of a heart for ministry and be able to see what God was doing and want to be a part of it. And he was so selfless that way that was really impressed me.
So there was this one time that I walked into my office and I realized that my computer had been dented, that there was an edge on it that was like slightly crooked, and it was like someone had dropped it. And I knew that I hadn't dropped it, and so I think we had a meeting that day, a worship production meeting, and everyone was sitting around the table, and it was Mark and Seth and Nate and myself and Kelly, and I said, my computer is dented, which one of you dropped it? And I said it to be a joke. No one said anything as I expected, and I just assumed that I bumped against the wall or something had happened to it. I don't know.
One night over the summer, Bessie Tan, Nate's sister, had me over. Of course, I was over there every day. And it was a really nice night, so we were sitting on her porch. And all of a sudden, she sets up dinner. Derek had, grilled stuff, and it was really nice. And all of a sudden, she sets out places, and then she goes inside, and Nate and I are left outside with like a candle burning and all this stuff, and she doesn't come back out. And all of a sudden, we realize that Bessie has tried to set us up on a date because she really wanted to make me a Kittelson. And that was her main goal. And it was pleasantly awkward for both of us, but it was a lot of fun.
So months go down the road, and Nate gets diagnosed with cancer, and he's at the beginning stages where he's still very lucid and funny and very much himself. And I got a phone call from him, and he said, hey man, how's it going? Just laying in the hospital and wanted you to know that I dropped your computer. and I think he expected me to be angry, but obviously you can't be angry at a kid sitting in a hospital bed with cancer. So I wasn't angry, and we talked for a minute, and he said, well, I've been thinking through some things. I've been calling people and asking forgiveness, and you asked me straight to my face, did you drop my computer? And I said no, and I just wanted to know if you'll forgive me for doing that. And I said, of course, and thought it was hilarious. It's just a funny story. Just Nate and his heart and just his desire to be clean that way and clean from any wrongdoing that he had done. So it was a cool moment. It was funny, and it just showed me even more what I knew, that Nate was just an awesome, awesome person.
Nate meant to me, he meant to me a lot of a father almost. I could tell him things that I wouldn't want to tell a lot of other people or even my parents or anything like that. It was something where I could go and tell him anything I was struggling with or anything that I was having a problem with, and I could trust him to not go and tell about it or make fun of me or anything like that, and he would give good, godly advice that I'd be able to use and that would help me with whatever I was struggling with.
One day we were having this conversation about the possibility of him going to Harvest Fairfax to help with the church plant there. And my mom instincts kicked in, and I told him right away that was going to be really hard for him to do, because he would have to go there basically with no income, because the church wouldn't be able to afford to pay him much of anything, if at all, initially. And he was going to an area where the cost of living was just going to be enormous. And I just remember saying to him, Nate, have you really thought through this? Are you really willing to do that much, to give up that much, the comforts of life, to go and just be a servant there? And he, without hesitation, said, of course. He'd be willing to sleep on the floor, share a house with 7 other people if he had to, if that's what it took for him to serve the Lord in that capacity. And we talked about Philippians 4, the verse that says, my God will supply all my needs. And I remember he turned to me and he said, Becky, when God says he's going to give you everything, he really, really means everything.
Yeah, Nate was inspiration to us, just to me especially, just watching the impact that he had on people that we told about his situation. My wife Hannah told her brother about Nate, and he was greatly impacted by it. And he's not religious really by any means, but he was. There were certain things that he would say, like, I wish that I even had the smallest amount of faith that Nate had. You know, things like that, which were just an incredible testimony of God showing his glory through Nate. You know?
I wanted to come and do this today because Nate was very close to all of us in our breakout group, and he taught me much about faith, and he was a great role model, and we were really good buds.
So at Winter Jam last year, Nate and I had the opportunity to have about 12 or 14 kids in a 10 by 12 room, and the aroma was overwhelming, so Nate and I left the room and stayed in a different room. And over the course of the evening, we had interruptions, but from about midnight to 2, we were able to spend some time talking and just talking about God's purpose in our lives. And I was just impressed with how assured he was, both in his salvation, but also in his purpose in life. And that purpose was to share the gospel with as many people as he could. And he talked a great deal about how his future would entail just that being the focal point of his life, sharing the gospel and reaching as many people for Christ as he could.
You know, when it came to him passing into the arms of Jesus, it was all Jesus, it was all the Lord, it was all for his glory, and he wanted nothing else in this life than to point to him.
One memory I have of Nate is it was shortly after work that we decided to hang out, and we didn't exactly know what we were doing that night. So we went out to eat and ended up coming back to the church. And it was the summertime, so it was really nice outside. So just decided to go out behind the church and just pray. Just pray for the church and pray for just God to move and just the mighty things of God. And it was just a sweet time. We were there for a couple hours at least. And it was so cool just sharing hearts and just hearing his heart for the body of Christ and for Jesus, and it was a rich time. And that's one of the things I'm really going to miss, because I had so many of those times with Nate, just times with the Lord and just in brotherhood, and yeah, that was really, really good.
I've known Nate a decade, almost to the year, actually. And when I met him, he was a child. And when he moved into my house, I thought I was going to have to show him how to be a man, I was the leader in the home. And it turns out, a year after he moves in, the roles changed, and he showed me what it was like to truly walk in faith, even through suffering and hardship. And I didn't get a chance to thank him for that, but it's all good.
He's been more than just a breakout leader to me. He's been such a great friend. And I count every day I've gotten to be in his breakout group a blessing, a direct blessing from God.
He was all about loving the Lord, but man, he did it with such joy, and it just came through, and the kids loved it, we loved it. That's just who Nate was.
It's easy to say that you're willing to give up everything for the Lord. It's a whole other thing to actually believe that, and it just was a great example of his complete trust in the Lord in every situation, because he truly, really was willing to give up everything.
It was such a privilege for me to have journeyed with Nate, to have done life with him, to have done ministry with him. I really considered him a kindred spirit, and I'm so proud of the way that he lived his life. He certainly wanted to bring God the glory in everything, and he did.
I am just so blessed and thankful that the Lord had me meet Nate. It was there was a lot of life to celebrate there.
We all need to kind of act a little bit more like him in a lot of ways.
He just really, really exemplified and taught us that our ultimate joy and our ultimate hope and our ultimate peace is not found here, and that it's found in the Lord, and is found in the fact and the truth that we're going to be with him eternally one day.
I also can't think of one other person who has collectively had a greater impact on my life than he has.
His name fits in well, gift from God. That's exactly what Nate Kittelson was to me, a gift from God.